The peace deal is finally here. Oil has dropped back toward pre-war levels, crypto is pulling back after a relief rally, and XRP investors are now asking one important question. What happens next? Because while the headlines are focused on the ceasefire, many investors believe the bigger story for XRP may actually be what happens after July 4th. And if momentum around the Clarity Act returns, it could become one of the most important catalysts for crypto in the second half of the year. Today we're breaking down what the peace agreement means for markets, why XRP pulled back after its recent rally, and why many investors are closely watching the weeks ahead. Let's dive in. First, let's talk about the peace deal. The United States and Iran have reportedly agreed to a 60-day ceasefire, and markets reacted exactly how many expected. Oil immediately moved lower. After weeks of uncertainty and geopolitical tension, crude oil prices have now fallen back toward levels we were seeing before the conflict escalated. And that's important because energy prices affect almost everything. Lower oil prices can help reduce inflation pressure, improve business conditions, and create a more favorable environment for financial markets. Now, whether this agreement holds long-term is still an open question. At this stage, it's more of a framework than a final permanent solution. And that's why many investors remain cautiously optimistic rather than fully convinced. Still, markets generally care about expectations more than certainty, and that's exactly what we've been seeing. The expectation of peace pushed oil lower before the agreement was officially announced. Then the announcement arrived, and much of that move had already been priced in. That's a classic market behavior. Buy the rumor, sell the news. And we're seeing similar patterns across multiple asset classes right now. The stock market has already been pushing higher. Major indexes recently reached or approached all-time highs as investors anticipated positive developments surrounding both the peace negotiations and broader economic conditions. But here's where it gets interesting. Once the expected news arrives, markets often pause. Not because the news is bad, but because investors start asking what comes next. And that's exactly where we are right now. If we look at crypto, we can see a very similar story unfolding. Bitcoin rallied back toward recent highs. XRP pushed all the way up near $1.30. Many digital assets experienced strong relief rallies as fears surrounding the conflict began fading. But now that the peace agreement has arrived, we're seeing some profit-taking across the market. XRP has pulled back, Bitcoin has cooled off, and many cryptocurrencies are trading lower today. That doesn't necessarily mean the trend is over. In fact, it may simply mean the market is looking for its next catalyst. And that brings us to what many XRP investors are watching most closely right now, the Clarity Act. Because while the peace deal may have dominated headlines over the past several weeks, regulatory clarity could soon become the center of attention again. And this next development could end up being far more important for XRP than the peace deal itself. Recent reports suggest that lawmakers continue working behind the scenes to advance crypto legislation. There are ongoing discussions between lawmakers, regulators, and industry participants as efforts continue to move the Clarity Act forward. Now, will it happen before July 4th? Probably not. At this point, most observers believe there simply isn't enough time. But that doesn't mean the opportunity is gone. Instead, attention is now shifting toward the period immediately after the July 4th recess. And that's where things could get very interesting. Because once lawmakers return, the focus could quickly shift back toward crypto regulation. If investors begin seeing real momentum around the Clarity Act, many believe capital could start flowing back into digital assets again. Why? Because regulatory clarity removes uncertainty. And uncertainty has been one of the biggest obstacles facing the crypto industry for years. Institutions want clear rules. Businesses want clear rules. Investors want clear rules. And if progress begins accelerating, it could create a completely different narrative for the market. Now, that doesn't guarantee prices move higher overnight, but it does create a reason for investors to start paying attention again. And sometimes that's all markets need. A new story, a new catalyst, a new reason to allocate capital. That's why many XRP investors are closely watching the weeks ahead, not because of what happened yesterday, but because of what could happen next. Between now and July 4th, markets may remain relatively quiet. We could see consolidation. We could see volatility. We could see some sideways movement. But once July 4th passes and lawmakers return to Washington, the conversation could shift rapidly. And if the Clarity Act starts gaining momentum, many believe crypto could find itself back in the spotlight. For XRP holders, that's the key takeaway. The recent pullback doesn't necessarily change the bigger picture. Many investors still view current prices as an opportunity to build positions while the market remains uncertain. Because if regulatory clarity eventually arrives, the environment for crypto could look very different than it does today. For now, all eyes remain on Washington, all eyes remain on the Clarity Act, and all eyes remain on what happens after July 4th. because the next major move for XRP may not be determined by geopolitics, oil prices, or stock market rallies. If you enjoyed today's XRP update, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss future XRP news and market analysis. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next update. Now those stories are beginning to move into the background. And when they do, investors start searching for the next major narrative. Many believe that narrative could become crypto regulation, specifically the Clarity Act. Because whether you're bullish on XRP, Bitcoin, Ethereum, or the broader crypto market, one thing most investors can agree on is that regulatory clarity matters. Institutions want certainty. Fund managers want certainty. Large investors want certainty. And once the market begins sensing that certainty is getting closer, that's often when capital starts positioning itself ahead of the event. That's why many investors aren't focused on today's pullback. They're focused on what happens when lawmakers return from recess. Could we see momentum build around the Clarity Act? Could headlines begin highlighting progress again? Could crypto return to the center of financial conversations? Those are the questions investors are asking right now. And if that happens, the current weakness we're seeing across crypto may end up looking very different in hindsight. Because throughout market history, some of the best opportunities often appear when sentiment is quiet and attention is somewhere else. Right now, most people are talking about wars, oil, politics, and stock market records. Very few people are talking about what regulatory clarity could mean for digital assets 6 months from now. And that's exactly why many long-term investors continue paying attention. For XRP specifically, many supporters believe that clear regulations could help unlock the next phase of adoption and institutional participation. Not overnight, not instantly, but gradually through increased confidence, increased participation, and increased capital entering the space. And that's really the bigger picture. The peace deal matters, oil matters, the stock market matters. But for crypto investors, the next major catalyst may not come from geopolitics at all. It may come from Washington, it may come from legislation, and it may come from finally getting clear rules for the digital asset industry. That's why the period after July 4th could be so important. The spotlight begins shifting, the headlines begin changing, and investors start focusing on what comes next. For now, markets may continue consolidating. We may see volatility, we may see uncertainty, but many investors believe the bigger opportunities are still ahead, and that's why they're continuing to watch the Clarity Act so closely. We'll continue monitoring every development as it unfolds. If you enjoyed today's XRP update, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss future XRP news, market updates, and crypto analysis. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next update.